soft side wave blowing in the water. It's hard to come back dry. Couldn't get it if you tried. Building these golden gates where I was born in. Crimson and toxin, not what I was expecting. Right on the south side, see. It's where we all could be. Right on the south side, see. It's where we all could be. Oh, I'll come around to meet you halfway. In my heart, and you've come so far. Building these golden gates where you can walk in. Why can't we be friends? We're all only human. Right on the south side, see. It's where we all could be. Right on the south side, see. It's where we all could be.
The night is young, I don't know where I'm supposed to be. I check my phone, but nothing's calling out to me. So I stay up late drinking with my friends, and I ain't ever gonna stop until I'm sick again. I think I've made up my decision, put my keys in the ignition. Then I see you walking to my door, and now you got me feeling strange. Don't think I'll ever be the same, because you got me feeling strange, and I've got no one left to blame. Yeah, when I saw you yesterday, I knew that nothing much had changed. I thought my life would be arranged, but now you got me feeling strange. I'm heading home, another day has reached its end. Switch off the clock, I'm going round the twist again. And then I wake up.
Hello, I'm Stephanie Humphrey, technology contributor, brand new author, and a proud PACT board member. I want to thank everyone for supporting PACT, the Philadelphia Alliance for Capital and Technologies, and the PACT Capital Conference 2020, the oldest capital conference in the Northeast. I want to thank PACT Capital Conference 2020 sponsors and PACT founding sponsors for their unfailing support in this very challenging environment. We are excited to bring this conference to you in an all virtual format. And to that end, we want to give special thanks to the Capital Conference hosts and chairman, Patrick Boyle, partner in charge of the audit and assurance practice in Pennsylvania, and Paul Doherty, tax partner and partner in charge of the Philadelphia practice from Eisner Amper, for their tireless work and energy during the planning of this unique conference. I want to mention that we'll be broadcasting over a series of dates leading up to our finale, The Lion's Den, on September 24th. Make sure you check your mobile app or desktop platforms for the full schedule. Today, we have another panel session that'll be of great interest to everyone and an informal networking event in our virtual environment powered by Remo. I now want to introduce you to our hosts and chairman, Paul and Patrick. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Paul Doherty, partner in charge of Eisner Amper's Philadelphia office. Eisner Amper is proud to support this conference, which is a fixture on the fall calendar for entrepreneurs and investors alike. As we get started, I would like to thank the industry track vice chairs for healthcare, Capella Ratnam, partner at New Spring Capital, for technology, Glenn Bressner, partner at Activate Venture Partners, and for early stage, Doc Pargi, SRI Capital. Their work created the great content you'll see during these virtual sessions. None of this could happen without the support of all of our amazing sponsors. Thank you to all of our sponsors, and please check out their information on the conference site. We had a wonderful kickoff session with yesterday's healthcare panel, which was very insightful and engaging. Today's focus will land on technology. Thank you.
Welcome and good morning to PACT's Capital Conference Technology Panel. Our theme this year is Emerging Selling Strategies and Approaches. We're really excited for the discussion this morning, but first let me introduce the sponsor of our program this morning, partner with Blank Rome, Josh Strober. Welcome, Josh.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Josh Strober. I'm a partner at the law firm of Blank Rome in Philadelphia, PA. I work out of our corporate M&A and securities group, which includes the Blank Rome Venture Group, a group within our firm focusing on emerging companies and the venture capital ecosystem. Blank Rome's a national law firm with offices in over 14 different cities in the US, with a significant presence in Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., New York, Los Angeles, and Houston. The Blank Rome Venture Group represents capital sources, including growth and venture stage equity financiers, as well as emerging companies and early stage companies in a number of different industries, including retail and consumer product, healthcare and healthcare IT, software, and life sciences. Since the inception of the venture group, we've executed on countless number of early stage and venture financing transactions, as well as a number of M&A transactions resulting from the success of those companies. Through it all, we've endeavored to build long-standing partnerships with our clients to help them achieve their business goals. Blank Rome is pleased to serve as a sponsor of the PACT Capital Conference. This year, we're sponsoring the conference's technology panel. We're also pleased to support the PACT vision to be a go-to resource for fast-growing companies and entrepreneurs in innovation throughout the Philadelphia region. And now, I would like to introduce the industry track Vice Chair of Technology, Glenn Bressner, Managing Partner for Activate Venture Partners. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Glenn Bressner. I'm the co-founder and the managing partner of Activate Ventures. And through a series of affiliated funds, Activate Ventures enjoys a 35-year legacy of making early-stage investments in the geography that the PACT organization covers. It's my privilege this year to be the vice chairman of the technology track for the PACT conference. And as a result of that role, I get to introduce the panel discussion for the technology track, which is emerging selling strategies that companies are using in the current environment as well as they will be using going forward. I hope you enjoy this panel. It's a very exciting topic, and look forward to coming back.
Welcome again, and welcome to our panelists. This morning, we're joined by the CEO of Social Ladder, Raavi Iqbal, the President and COO of Veeva, Tom Schwenger, and the CEO of scaleMatters, Scott Stoufer. Welcome, Raavi. Welcome, Tom. Welcome, Scott.
Thanks. Thanks a lot.
So we're going to have a conversation this morning about a very interesting topic that I know is near and dear to all of you. And I want to first start by some introductions. And I asked you, give a little bit of personal background, kind of your entrepreneurial journey, a little bit on your company, and then we'll get into a discussion about what each of your companies is doing around selling strategies, as I said prior, particularly in the pandemic. Tom, you want to kick us off?
Sure. Thanks, Dean. And thanks for having me here today. And thanks to PACT for putting this together. I'm excited to be part of the panel. Just a little bit of background on Veeva Systems. So Veeva was founded in 2007. Our vision is to be the industry cloud for life sciences, which means we primarily serve the pharmaceutical industry. So the Pfizers and Novartises and the Mercks of the world are our client base. We are primarily a cloud software company. We also have a data business and a services business as well. And we have just over 4,000 employees. We're growing pretty rapidly and continuing to grow in the Philadelphia area as well. So really excited to be here from a Veeva perspective. For me personally, in my role as COO, I've got responsibility for the customer-facing parts of the business. So that's three main parts of Veeva. That's the sales organization, which we're going to talk about today. It's the services organizations, and also what we call the strategy practice, which is really the go-to-market functions within the company. So the ones who define the markets and are the face to the markets for those areas that we serve. In terms of my background, I joined Veeva about a year ago after spending about 30 years with Accenture, the management consulting company, and really grew up spending most of my time in the life sciences industry. Focused on a combination of technology, strategy, and outsourcing. So I have a range of services-based experience, and now I'm adding product experience to that. On the personal front, I live in Plymouth Meeting, and I've been in the Philadelphia area my whole life. Went to school at Penn State, and I actually have a son that just graduated from Penn State. He's in a couple of weeks, he starts in the consulting industry as well. His major was supply chain at Penn State, and I've got a daughter who's a junior at Miami down in Florida. So for those of you Penn Staters out there, yes, we have the Penn State-Miami battle in the household pretty regularly. So that's just a little bit about me.
Interesting conversations to come during the holidays for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Tom, what led you to move from consulting after a career in consulting into Veeva?
Yeah, it was really a chance to get even deeper into the life sciences industry. Like I said, I spent a good part of my career at Accenture in life sciences. And I had the opportunity at Accenture to get some additional experiences in other industries, and I really found myself wanting to get back into the healthcare and life sciences space. And I had kind of a unique opportunity at Veeva to do that. It's also a company that I had worked with very closely. They have a significant presence in the commercial side of the business, so sales and marketing functions, and that's where I grew up on the Accenture side. So I had worked with the Veeva team since they started in the late 2000s. So a chance to really add that product dimension to my experience, which has been quite a journey for the first year so far.
Tom, if folks that are watching are not familiar with Veeva, it might make sense if they're not in the pharmaceutical area. Can you just give a little bit more about the scale and success of the organization? I mean, I know it, but a lot of the folks that might be watching may not.
Sure, and you're right. We are a very focused company. So focus is one of our keys to success over the years. And it started on the CRM side. So we are the dominant provider of CRM services to the pharmaceutical industry. So most of the sales reps that are out there that are calling on doctors use our cloud technology to manage their day-to-day activities. And that has branched out significantly over the last decade or so into the R&D side of the business. So areas like clinical and regulatory and safety are all now part of our portfolio. And really what we do is we bring together data and documents in a very highly regulated way for unique functions within the industry. So as you can imagine, because of the nature of the pharmaceutical industry, those companies require very bespoke, unique solutions that aren't like other vertical industries. So we're very vertically focused within life sciences, and have quite a large presence in Philadelphia, which has always been our sort of home base on the East Coast. The company is headquartered in Pleasanton, California, but a big focus of our East Coast presence is in the Philadelphia area.
Not surprising given the number of pharmaceutical companies in the area, but I do think you're a hidden gem. I'm not sure many people would know that Veeva's arguably its second largest region is Philadelphia.
Yeah, it is. It is a well-kept secret, but hopefully this gets the message out some more.
One last piece. What if you can share? What's your market share within the pharmaceutical world on the CRM product side?
It's north of 80% in the core CRM space.
And this is why it'll be relevant to talk to you about what pharmaceutical companies are doing on the sales side. So look forward to that conversation. Yeah. Raavi, give us a little background on you, on introduction to the company, and then, as I said, we'll talk further about the product a little later in the program.
Sounds good. So first of all, thank you, Dean, and thanks, PACT and the sponsors for having me here today and for doing this panel. A little bit of my background. I actually have a technology background. Learned how to write code when I was 8 years old. Ended up really joining my first startup as a co-founder about 15 years ago, and ended up growing that startup as the person running product development, and really made the transition from being a technical person to being a manager at that startup, and ended up in the Philadelphia region through that startup, and had this idea one day for Social Ladder, which at the time was a very, very simple idea. Imagine if a guy walks into a bar, if that guy happens to have 5,000 Instagram followers, shouldn't the bar owner buy him a drink, right? If he knew who he was. And this morphed over time, obviously, as many startups do. But it was a concept that at the time was very much ahead of its time, and now has become more relevant than ever. So excited to be here today.
You're a little bit of PACT royalty, Raavi. I'm not sure the rest of the audience will know this fact, but Raavi and his company were one of the winners of the Lion's Den just a couple of years ago. And if you're not familiar with the Lion's Den, it's again going to be September 24th this year. But Raavi made it through presentations with 49 other companies to be one of 3 finalists, and ultimately to get an investment that did close, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we definitely owe a lot to PACT, and the Lion's Den was a phenomenal experience, and it was riveting for sure. We ended up, I think at the time, being closing one of the largest amounts ever on the Lion's Den stage, and it was a great way to really drive momentum into the round that we had, and we closed the round soon after that. So it was a fantastic experience.
Well, your story's not finished yet, so we look forward to learning more about what you're doing.
Thank you.
All right, Scott, last but not least.
Thanks, Dean, for hosting, and thanks, PACT, for having us as well. So my company, scaleMatters, it's a vertically focused BI company, and it's specifically focused on bringing rich data to bear to help other tech companies get kind of super efficient at sales and marketing, and allow them to basically scale faster and grow faster because of that. Kind of the genesis behind the company was I've been doing this startup scene for quite a while. This is actually my 5th one, and I've been on a number of boards, and we've just watched so many companies sort of early in growth stage struggle to get super efficient at customer acquisition and burn through a lot of capital while they're doing that. And so the concept was at a previous company, we put a lot of data into place, and we said, look, we could productize this approach and effectively, reduce cost of acquisition by 50 or 75% for these companies, and allow them to take that freed up capital and either accelerate growth, or potentially more important with the pandemic issue going on, use that to extend runway. So that's the concept behind scaleMatters. My background, double E from Lehigh, so not far from Philadelphia, MBA from NYU, grew up in the tech world, mostly through the product management ranks, and then started my first company, Visual Networks, back in early/mid 90s. Had good success there, grew the company to over $100 million, a public company, $2 billion valuation. So we've basically been doing this for a good 25 years or more. And what I'd say I've morphed from sort of a product visionary person to someone who's been intensely focused on operational efficiency driven by data, and particularly around the sales and marketing or customer success side of businesses. We're headquartered in Maryland, right outside Washington, D.C., just north of D.C. The company itself is less than 2 years old. We've got, I think, 16 full-time people, and while we're headquartered in the DC area, we're really spread all over the place.
Virtual.
Pretty much. Even before it was fashionable.
Well, Tom will speak to that too, because even as big as Veeva is, there's much that's virtual about their organization. Hey, Scott, one thing that I find interesting about your business, you're really looking to bring science to what I would say historically has been referred to as the art of the sales process.
Yeah, for sure, Dean. And, you see it in larger companies because they have the resources to start to get pretty sophisticated with the way they do things. They can have data analysts, they can invest in a whole bunch of technology. But in fact, our name scaleMatters, it kind of comes from the fact that we're focused on subscale companies. Think of it as companies that are less than 50 or 100 million in annual sales, and they may not have the resources to bring the data infrastructure into play. And what we see then is, people largely flying on intuition and gut. And while, generally people have hopefully enough experience to make good decisions, we've seen if you can bring data to bear, that it's that much better. And that you can start to manage these customer acquisition efforts with a level of precision that we say is science-like precision.
Terrific. Well, we'll come back to you and get deeper into your product. Tom, let me circle back with you. What's interesting, I think, about the conversation this morning is not only is Veeva very much a virtual company pre-pandemic, so if you could speak to that a little bit, but you have two pieces that you plug into directly relevant to the topic this morning. One is your own company efforts to sell into the pharmaceutical and also expanding markets. And the second is the effort of your customers to also sell using your products. It'd be great if you could speak to both of those.
Yeah, sure. And maybe as context before I get into those two, the interesting thing for us that to have observed over the course of COVID is the impact to which COVID created a fulcrum for change in the healthcare industry broadly. Arguably, healthcare may have been the industry that responded with the most innovation to this current crisis out of necessity on multiple dimensions. If you look at what's happening in the realm of vaccines and therapeutics, we hear about this every day, about the advances that are being made in the understandable rush to get to a vaccine, which could positively impact all of us if we can get there quickly. Same thing on the therapeutic side. If you then also look at telemedicine, many of us, probably most of the audience, have now had some sort of interaction with a healthcare professional over video, which was always available to us, but there were barriers in terms of change management to really engaging with physicians online. And those barriers all sort of went away when it became a necessity. And we saw the same thing happen within our business. So first on the sales and marketing side, the ways that our customers, the pharmaceutical industry, interact with healthcare professionals, doctors, nurse practitioners, et cetera, has changed dramatically during this time because most of those interactions were in person and those have shifted to digital. And we have a platform that supports that called Engage Meeting. that uses Zoom technology under the covers, but basically creates a lot of functionality that allows, in a very secure and compliant way, pharmaceutical companies to engage directly with HCPs, healthcare professionals or doctors. And the uptake on that has been pretty significant over this period. In fact, over 500,000 doctors have downloaded our technology in order to engage with the industry over the last few months during the pandemic.
Tom, can you give us a sense of what it was before the pandemic? You said 500,000 clinicians. What was it before the pandemic?
It was significantly less than that. I don't have the number at hand, but think of it as a multiple factor. It wasn't even half of that. And so the usage of this went through the roof, just like the usage of doctors with telemedicine with their patients. The same thing happened on the other side in terms of the way doctors interacted with the life sciences industry. And so that fundamentally changed the nature of the relationship, not only in how the information was shared, but actually, interestingly, if you look at the time of engagement, in the pre-pandemic world, the typical engagement of a pharma rep with a doctor would be somewhere in the 3-minute range. These were hallway conversations often, et cetera. The average time of those engaged meetings is over 20 minutes globally, and that number has sustained through multiple cycles. And so the nature of the discussion, because it's very personal, it's very intimate, and it's very content rich, because they can also share digital information in those interactions, has fundamentally changed the nature of the conversation between the industry and the healthcare providers. So it's been a real game changer for the industry for sure.
Wow, that is shocking. 3 minutes to 20 minutes.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
A significant amount of added time. Have your customers seen differences in terms of their sales closures, their market expansion?
It's a little early to tell, because also there's the total volumes are still impacted by the pandemic. So it's a very complicated set of factors that you're looking at to see total impact change. So obviously wouldn't talk about specific customers and performance, but what we can see is the nature and the quality of that engagement at an interaction level. So that's really where we're focused. And then you also asked about internally within Veeva. We've got a pretty significant sales force that supports that company structure that I described earlier. And as you said, that sales force has always been very remote and very virtual in terms of how they operated. So we weren't heavily impacted by the pandemic in terms of our operations. We were able to continue pretty much similarly to the way we operated pre-pandemic. One of the biggest differences for us was our ability to get access to customers actually increased during the pandemic, because everyone was kind of locked down. And so what we saw was just a lot more of people's time, both on our side as well as on our customer side, was spent doing calls like this. And so there became, because there wasn't as much travel, the activity within organizations became a lot more focused on this type of interaction. We actually saw an increase in access to our customer base during the pandemic as well.
Tom, well before COVID, your company was effectively built to be virtual and built on Zoom. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because there are a lot of companies now that are utilizing this technology, minute by minute, day by day. But this is something that you all have had a lot of experience with.
Yeah, we were an early adopter of Zoom for sure, and one of the companies that uses it quite extensively. So we have a very tight relationship between Zoom and Veeva. But interestingly, on that front too, the thing about this video technology is there's a lot of other options out there, and it isn't a standard yet. Like if you think about the way email works, for example, it doesn't matter what email client you send from, so anyone else who has email can read it. In the world of video conference, it's different, and so one of the recent announcements that we made just a couple of weeks ago is an enhancement to our Engage platform, where we are going to enable the functionality of Engage not only on Zoom, but embedded, which is the way it works today, but also with Microsoft Teams and with native Zoom with native Zoom as well. So you can use those two platforms in addition to the embedded platform in Engage, to depending on what the preference of the HCP, the doctor, would be. There are some environments where doctors prefer to use a different platform, and we're trying to be as open and flexible as possible to enable as much of that interaction as we can. So yes, we have a very significant relationship with Zoom. We've also made some announcements around additional platforms as well.
So as it pertains to sales, Tom, let me ask you this question. A lot of us that are new to Zoom, which is probably just about everybody on this phone call, are talking about Zoom fatigue, right? The past couple months have brought a lot of Zoom fatigue. You all have been using this technology for a long period of time. Was there a period of Zoom fatigue and it just became part of the normal process for Veeva? What is your guidance as it pertains to sales for everyone else that's listening and thinking about enterprise sales around that Zoom fatigue issue?
Yeah, I would say two things that we've learned. First of all, it's something everyone has to deal with, and they're definitely. I know many of us are feeling it as the pandemic, continues on longer than many of us thought it would. So it's something that, from a company perspective, you need to really be thoughtful about. So two things that we've done. One is we've implemented something called the 10-minute rule, which means any 60-minute meetings should only be 50 minutes, because you should give people 10 minutes between meetings to interact with their family, because they're typically in their home for these periods of time, but also to get other things done so that you aren't doing a lot of multitasking during the meetings. And that people have responded pretty well to that. Many companies have also implemented things like meeting-free Fridays. Some companies have created video hiatuses for a certain period of time. And that gets to the second point, which is one thing you'll find as a company, and many of you are probably finding this individually as well, is in this world of constant Zoom meetings or constant video meetings, transactionally, you can get a lot more done than you did in a pre-pandemic world, but often it is very transactional. So what you don't get as much time to do is the system two thinking or slow thinking around bigger, more strategic concepts. And many of us took for granted that in the previous world, we did a lot of that thinking during our downtime, maybe in a taxi, maybe on a plane, maybe during a drive to and from work, et cetera. And when we don't have that time anymore, we lose some of the system two thinking time. And so you have to carve out time in your day to go for a walk, to get away from the video calls in order to allow yourself to do some of that system two thinking. And that's been something we've really focused on as well.
Great advice. All right, Raavi, we're excited to have you here this morning because we're really trying to present a balance of both enterprise sales, but also retail/consumer sales. And you really tackle both sides of this because you have enterprise customers, but your product ultimately is consumer focused. Talk to us a little bit more about, again, Social Ladder, what it is that you do, and how things have changed in the pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. So Social Ladder fundamentally is a SaaS platform for building brand communities for brands, right? So we work with, as you described, many different types of brands, but these brands have one thing in common. They're all B2C companies. They're consumer focused. So our technology is a way for our customers to kind of harness the power and energy of their customer base and empower that customer base to help them get the word out about their products. So one of the things that I think is really accelerated by COVID, but was a transition that was happening well before, is this lack of trust in advertising, right? So as consumers, we're all tired of traditional advertising that's been in our face. And I think that one of the things that we've seen, the trends that we've seen with the COVID crisis, is that it became even more offensive to have traditional ads in front of consumers' faces. And so what we saw initially was a huge pullback from marketers that were marketing to consumers. And they were trying to figure out, how can we really get a voice? How can we communicate and continue to talk about our products, continue to sell our products when our customer base is dealing with an unprecedented level of stress and anxiety. And what I think we found, and we were very excited to find this, is that so many of these B2C companies have realized that their customers who are already passionate about their products are in fact the best way to market during this type of crisis. And so what we've seen brands do is really lean into this type of advocacy marketing, right? Going beyond just traditional paid media, beyond even influencer-focused objectives, and start to move into real, true advocacy marketing using regular customers who are already passionate about the products to get the word out. And so we've seen really initially, I think in April and May, it was a very difficult time for our company as well, because brands, so many of the brands we work with, these B2C companies, were pulling back and really unsure of how they would proceed, how they could communicate, how they could have a conversation with their customers. And then what started to happen at the end of May and beginning of June, and has really started to build momentum through to today, is that they realized that products like a social ladder that allow them to harness and build these communities and really have a voice during this type of crisis have really started to get a lot of momentum. And we've seen that on the sales side as well.
Influencers, is a term that didn't exist probably 10 years ago, at least in the current social media world. Can you talk about influencers within your business, what it is that they bring to a brand?
Absolutely.
Is it about building a community, or is it about an individual?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think what's happened is over the last 5 years, influencer marketing gained a lot of steam, but it's changed significantly. For those of you that aren't too familiar with influencer marketing, what happened is initially influencer marketing started from celebrity marketing, right? We've all seen the celebrities on the Wheaties box, right? That was the original concept around influencer marketing. And it became such that influencers became smaller and smaller and smaller, because what was happening is consumers' lack of trust in traditional advertising translated to influencers as well, right? So I don't necessarily trust Kim Kardashian because I know she's getting paid to talk about a certain brand. And so it became, smaller bloggers and then micro influencers. And now what we're seeing is, influencer content in general is, we've seen studies that influencer marketing content in general is 10x more effective at converting than traditional paid media. But now regular user-generated content by regular people that aren't traditionally looked at as influencers is actually 10 times more effective than that. So there is a significant move from consumer-focused brands to really double down on post-influencer marketing, which is really about this concept of regular people talking about brands and products that they love.
Can you give us an example, a use case, if you will, of one of your customers?
Absolutely. So one of our favorite customers is actually GoPuff, based in the region here. And GoPuff uses Social Ladder to run their entire brand ambassador management, their entire brand ambassador program. And so they have a program of a quite large program. I can't give too many details about it, but of regular people that are out there talking about the brand on a daily basis. They're creating content on social media. They're getting their friends to download GoPuff. They are really doing a number of different things. And all of that is powered by our technology. And one of the differences really in our technology is that we've taken a very consumer community-focused approach. So where traditional influencers are very much focused on building their own brand, and the relationships between brands and influencers tend to be very transactional. Hey, I'll give you $100 to do something. When you're dealing with regular consumers, you really are dealing with a community. And so having the ability to engage those people at a personal level, having the ability to engage them in a community and allow them to engage with each other is really the direction that we're seeing a lot of brands go, is building these brand-focused communities and using those customers to get the word out.
Social marketing was certainly around before the pandemic. What do you think is going to stick post-pandemic heading into the future as it pertains to retail or consumer marketing?
Yeah, I think this really what's happened in the pandemic is it's accelerated this shift. people who were already wary of traditional advertising are now, realize that they really just don't want to deal with it. And so I think that what we're seeing more and more is brands actually doubling down on the concept of using regular people. And it's not just, part of what's happened through this time period is a general pullback from traditional advertising, and not just even traditional advertising, even from social media advertising, right? We all heard about during the social justice crisis that's been happening, how brands are pulling back from Facebook, right? What's happening is brands are realizing that they need a way to own their own community. They need access to the data around that community. And traditional advertising wasn't giving it to them, and even advertising with social media platforms like Facebook wasn't necessarily giving it to them. So brands getting more savvy, owning the community, owning the data, really wanting to be able to understand and connect with their customers at another level is something that we think is going to absolutely persist well beyond the pandemic.
Great. Last question, Raavi, for this piece, this segment. You also have your own sales efforts, right? As an organization selling to enterprises like GoPuff. How has that changed?
Yeah. So it's really interesting. I think we've learned a lot by how our customers are talking to their consumers. And we've used that as a way to tune our own sales process. So one of the things we realized is that really content and empathy are critical to engaging with the brands that we engage with on a daily basis, because they are also dealing with the stress and anxiety, right? That all of us as regular people are dealing with. So especially when brands are consumer focused, they're feeling an undue amount of pressure and stress. And it really has to do with the unknown. And so instead of doing the traditional outbound email marketing that we were doing before, what we started to do is really lead with content. So we started to invest in creating engaging content about how brands are handling the crisis. We created engaging content about how brands are using community. And we started to really just check in with our prospects at a personal, at a human level. And I think that this is really interesting because it is kind of mirroring the approach that brands are taking at a macro scale in dealing with consumers, right? They're trying to lead with empathy. They're trying to engage with community. They're trying to really, emphasize this human touch. And I think that in selling, and our customers are, enterprises, they're B2C brands. We found that those same strategies are very, very effective during this time. Because what happened is we were able to build these relationships. We were able to nurture, instead of coming across as kind of someone else trying to sell something. We were providing value in the equation. We were relating and leading with empathy. And then when it came time for brands to say, hey, we really need a solution, they were quick to return the phone call and engage with us.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, Scott. Scott, one of the things that we've heard, and PACT has hundreds of customers, of members that range from startups all the way up to large enterprises, and the message has been pretty consistent, particularly for those that sell to enterprises. Out of the gate, it was pretty easy to maintain relationships and expand relationships with existing customers, but selling to new ones in this environment has been really challenging. So as you share a little bit about scaleMatters, it would be interesting to gather some insight from you, from your efforts with your customers, on how that might be changing.
Sure. So if you start with this kind of high-level assumption that if you give revenue leaders high-integrity data and some framework for how to interpret that, then the assumption is they'll make better decisions than they would if they had a vacuum of that information, right? And so let's take a very classic example, which is the decisions on messaging or potentially product features, et cetera. What has happened historically is, product managers, product marketers sit there sort of in a vacuum of not having this intimate understanding of their customers or prospects. It's gotten even worse as more and more of the buying process has become digitized, if you will. And so salesperson gets off the last call where they just lost the deal and says, hey, if we don't do this, we're never going to sell any of these products. And so the information available there is sort of this data point of one, potentially the most outspoken salesperson, and that tends to historically have affected decisions on how to message things or what features to prioritize in a roadmap. One of the interesting things with the pandemic, as more and more of the interactions have become, remote via Zoom, et cetera, you actually have this treasure trove of data, which is these unstructured recordings of the conversations. And one of the things that we do, for example, at scaleMatters, is we actually extract all of this structured data out of these unstructured recordings so that we're able to provide the marketers, for example, with very clear information about which persona types of a customer are we more likely to have success with or less likely to have success with? What are the issues in language coming up in these conversations from these ones that we struggle with? And therefore, what can we actually do about it? So we go from having this environment where, you're sort of dependent on salespeople providing, market representative information to you. And that's just a suspect proposition to start with, to where you actually have statistically valid, unbiased data that these people can make great decisions on. And so, when you talk about the difficulty of selling to new customers or selling versus selling to current customers, doing upsells or renewals, I think a lot of that difficulty stems from the fact that a major friction point that always exists in companies, but really exists in earlier stage companies, is a lack of very tight product market message fit. And so without this very kind of optimized product market message fit, you have this constant friction point, if you will, right? It elongates sales cycles, it depresses win rates, it depresses average sales price. But we have this information available to us now to actually more rapidly converge on an optimized product market message fit, which can help you selling to these new customers versus when you sort of had to rely on sporadically available anecdotes that come from the sales team. Does that make sense, answering that question a little bit?
It does. What exactly, Scott, do you deliver to a sales leader, for example, like Tom, in terms of information or data, taking all that unstructured data, putting it into some structure? Is it a dashboard? Is it what is it that you deliver that helps that decision-making, that approach from the sales perspective?
Sure. Well, we do a couple things. First is, if you think of the process of acquiring new customers, not unlike some factory floor, and maybe you have different, manufacturing factory floor, and maybe you have different strategies for acquiring customers, and those might be different lines in the factory floor. In a factory, virtually all of this data is machine-generated data, so it's high integrity. One of the fascinating things in sales and marketing is the vast majority of the data that we have to draw from is based on the way the users interact with the technology, meaning the way salespeople interact with the CRM or marketing people interact with the marketing automation platform, et cetera. And so there's just a ton of inconsistency. There's a ton of contradictory data. So we start with this fundamental assumption that that your data is garbage. So the first thing we do is we come in and instrument your environment. So we map out your strategies in this gory detail as if they were specific manufacturing processes, and provide instrumentation so that everything can be measured. So think of that almost as a service, where what we've done is conditioned your sales and marketing engine or environment so it's eminently measurable. Then we have our own proprietary BI app, which effectively grabs all of these data points or these measurement points across multiple tools. So we connect into the CRM, into the marketing automation platform, into these call recording tools, and so we're sort of ingesting this vast amount of data from the environment, and then mashing it together into visualizations that are purpose-built for the needs of sales and marketing leadership, or CEOs of these companies. And then the third thing we do, particularly for our smaller customers, meaning kind of sub 25 million or so, is most of those companies don't have business analysts in their sales and marketing organizations. And it's one thing to provide people with great data, but somebody needs to interpret it. Not unlike if you are getting great images out of a CT scan. You need the radiologist or someone to look at it and say, all right, what does this mean? Well, most of these companies don't have those people. And again, this isn't meant disparaging at all, but you don't typically think of the people that populate the sales function or the marketing function as kind of highly analytical types. And so we do see in larger companies, they start to bring in business analysts into their RevOps teams, et cetera. But in smaller companies, they don't have anyone that knows how to kind of interpret this. So we have a team of analysts that actually uses our app on behalf of the customers to analyze all of the data and curate that into kind of profound insights that are at the level that the CEO or the CRO would find very useful, and they become very actionable.
Thanks, Scott.
Sure.
So we have just a couple minutes left. I'm going to do a little bit of a speed round with each of our panelists before we finish up. Let me start with Tom. Tom, we talked about how you, even pre-pandemic, were operating virtually in many different ways. Talk to me about your customers. How are things going to change when it is safe for us to be back physically, where sales reps can visit with doctors? Will you go back? Will your customers go back to that? Or will they use the Engage platform increasingly to connect with their customers?
Yeah, I think there's one thing that we've all agreed on across the industry, which is there is no going back. So we certainly will see a return to some in-person engagement, and some of the previous processes will come back. But in terms of the sort of the ratios of physical to virtual, those will never be the same. Because again, once you break through that change barrier that I talked about before, you realize that in many ways, this can be a more efficient way to engage. Both from a physician's perspective, it creates a much more convenient model. From a life sciences company perspective, it creates the opportunity for a much richer discussion. And so both sides are now incented to change the model going forward. And that's one of the things we're working through with many of our customers, is what that future commercial and selling model looks like. And different companies have different views on exactly where that's going to land. And I think it's going to be one of the future competitive battlegrounds for the industry is who has the best model for the digital world of the future. That's going to be very different than the digital world of the past. So we don't see going back to pre-pandemic approaches at all.
Interesting. Raavi, social media, again, social influencing, that's something that was around pre-pandemic. We've talked about the move of advertising from traditional models to online and to social. What's going to happen post-pandemic?
Well, I think it's going to be really this emphasis on customer as a marketing channel. That's really an untapped opportunity. So, during this pandemic, as we talked about, so many brands have really looked inward at their customer communities and found ways to leverage their customer community to drive sales and awareness. And I think that this is, absolutely going to be one of the key areas that's out there and a key opportunity. So being able to look at the customer community, use artificial intelligence to surface those customers that have the greatest ability to move the needle for the brand, really find the diamonds in the rough. We talk to so many customers now, and it's unbelievable how many brands are out there that don't know who their customers are, from the standpoint of, they have diamonds in the rough today that love their products and just need a little bit of love to help get the word out about the brand. So I think that's absolutely going to be one of the things that stays.
Great. And Scott, will science win the day when it comes to sales and marketing?
Oh, I think it has to. And the reason is that it's just completely transformative. I mean, our customers that we have were reducing their cost of acquisition anywhere between 25% and 75%. And the sales and marketing budget tends to be one of the bigger budgets for these companies, right? So imagine that freed up capital. I'd say the one thing that might change post-pandemic is people will take that freed up capital, and instead of focusing on extending their runway, which is sort of where people are going right now, in pandemic mode, they'll reinvest it to speed up growth. But there really is no going back. Once you start to have the ability to manage this stuff with the precision that exists out there today, I mean, you're just irresponsible not to do it that way.
Well, thank you, Scott. Thank you, Tom and Raavi. Please join us in our virtual Remo session. More information on that here shortly. And you'll be joined by Tom, Raavi, and Scott, and able to sit at a table and continue the conversation. Enjoy the rest of your morning. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Raavi, Tom, and Scott. That was a great session. We're now ready to kick it over to our Remo session. But before we do so, let me turn it over to Glenn Bresner, our Tech Track Vice Chair.
Thank you, everyone, and to our panelists and moderator for an exceptional discussion. Hope everybody enjoyed it and found it valuable. We would like now to invite everyone to tune into the next broadcast episode, which is the featured company presentations, as well as our finale, The Lion's Den, which is an exceptional event. Check your mobile and desktop platform for the schedule. But first, join our panelists and moderator in an informal networking session for 30 minutes following this event. Again, thank you, everybody, for joining this session, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
On your screen now, you'll find a QR code to access the virtual networking room powered by Remo. Please use this QR code to enter the networking now. We look forward to seeing you there.